In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the formatting features in Excel. We're not going to do anything with formulas. We're just going to look at how you can make a spreadsheet look nice. First of all, let's take a look at the cursor shapes. Most of the time when you're down in the data area of the spreadsheet here, the cursor is going to be a white plus sign, a big fat white plus sign, and when it's in that shape you can select whatever you want just by clicking and dragging. And when you do that, that's called arrange. And almost all the time when you're down here, that's going to be the shape. If you want to do a non-adjacent range, do what you usually do in Windows applications, and that's just hold the control key down when you try to make the second or the third or any subsequent selection. So if you've got a bunch of non-adjacent areas and you want to format them so they all look the same, you don't have to do it several times. You can just select them all at once and do the formatting once and be done with it. Now there is also there's two other shapes that show up down here, and that is if you are moving around the outside of a selection here, you'll get the four-headed arrow, which is a standard icon for moving something. So if you want to move something, that's how you'd move it. And also in the lower right hand corner is something called the fill handle, which is used for copying, which is something we'll talk about later on. But if you want to select stuff, do not use the four-headed arrow and do not use the skinny black plus sign. Always use the fat white plus sign. Some other ways to select: you can select columns by going to the top of the column. You get this fat black arrow pointing down and you select every cell in the entire column. You can click and drag and select multiple columns. You can click on the first column and shift click on the last column and select everything in between. If you want non-adjacent columns, it's the same as with non-adjacent selection. Hold the control key down and click, and you can select as many non-adjacent columns as you want to. And it works the same way over here with rows. You can click and drag, you can click and then shift click, or you can click and then control click to get non-adjacent rows. Okay, so those are the basics of selecting items in Excel. And there's one other one. Right here to the left of the A and above the 1, there's this little triangle. And it's not really labeled, and it might look like it's nothing, but if you click on it, it selects every single cell in the entire spreadsheet. So if you want to change everything in the spreadsheet, like we're going to do right now, select that first. No, you can also do a Control A. Now I want to change my font here to Verdana, so I'm just going to type VE, and Verdana comes up, and I just changed my entire spreadsheet to Verdana, and I'm going to shrink the font size down here to 10. Okay, now let's take a look at some other things. We're going to be looking at a lot of stuff from the font and alignment and number groups here on the Home tab today. So let's select column A by going to the top and clicking, and I'm going to make everything in that column bold. So I can click on the B here, or the shortcut key is Control B, and everything is bold. We can do borders. I'm going to select from A1 to F1 here, and the borders all have names, and I want what's called a thick bottom border. And if I click off of there, now you can see that the thick bottom border is there. You can also do fill colors. If I want my totals over here, for example, to look a little different from the other numbers, I can put a colored background behind them using the paint bucket. And if I want the numbers themselves to look a little different, I can make them a different color as well by clicking on the A up here and then selecting my color. Okay, we can also in the alignment group here, we can align text, and I'll just select everything in column A, and we're going to right align the text that's there. We've also got options for center align, left align, and then if you have really tall cells, let's make this row here really tall. If you get really tall cells, you can control the vertical alignment as well. This will put them at the top, This will put them in the middle, and this will put them at the bottom. And I'm just going to undo a few times to get back to where we were. Okay. So that's the 6 basic alignment commands. Also, notice here that percent of budget doesn't fit in column F, and it flops over into column G. That'll work as long as there's nothing in column G. If there's something in column G, then this is going to get truncated. And what you may want to do, you've got 2 choices here. You can make the column wider, but it doesn't really need to be that wide for anything other than the heading. The numbers are relatively small. Or probably the best thing to do is choose wrap text up here, and that basically just tells it to wrap the text around to the next line. And it also makes the row tall enough to accommodate the text. And it put each word on a separate line, and so you can go back and tweak that a little bit later if you want to. What I did was I just went over here and got the double-headed arrow to change the size of the column, and let's make that a little bigger again. And if you double-click when you get the 2-headed arrow, it'll make the row just as tall as it needs to be. The same thing applies with columns. If I double-click to the edge of a column, it'll make the column just as wide as it needs to be, but actually I don't want it that narrow. It looks a little crowded, so we'll make it a little bit bigger here. Okay. You can also insert text. Let's right click on this and choose insert, and it'll insert a new row for us here. These options are also available over here on the insert button on the toolbar. And let's put some text in there. We're going to put a title on this. So we're going to call it budget. And I want this to look a little different. I want it to spread all the way across all of these cells here, and there's an option to merge and center the cells, and just click on this right here, and it takes those cells and merges them into one and centers them over columns A through F. And regardless of what I do to columns A through F, it'll remain centered over columns A through F. Okay, a couple of other alignment options that we missed here. There is a rotate option. If you click on the down arrow, it gives you a bunch of choices. We don't really need to do that right now. I'm not sure there's a lot of times when you need to do that. Let's do undo here to get it back the way it was. And you can also increase the indentation. I'm not sure that makes much sense on something that's centered, but let's take a look down here with total. I can indent that a little bit, and if you click it again, it indents it a little bit further. And if you want to undo it, this will take it back again. So if centering your column headings like this doesn't work, doesn't look quite right, you can tweak it a little bit by going in here and changing the indentation. Another thing you can do is you can set the column width to a specific value. If I go to the top of the column here and right click and choose column width, I can set it to whatever value I want to set it to. So and you got to kind of guess at this sometimes, so let's make it 12 and click on OK, and there we go. And then let's take all of these headings up here and let's right align them. And let's also center them vertically. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at the numbers that we have down here. We can format numbers, and we've got a number of choices on that. These are all in the number group here. And we've got a drop-down list that has a bunch of common choices for number formats, as well as more, which lets you get really specific as far as setting the number format. The default is general. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put dollar signs in front of these numbers here in the first row and the ones in the last row. So I'm going to do a control and select the last row at the same time, and I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of them. And when you do that, you get 2 extra decimal places, and with big numbers you probably don't need those decimal places, so we're going to go up here to our decreased decimal and decrease that twice. Notice there's also an increased decimal, which will let you add as many decimal places as you want. And there we go. So it puts commas and 2 decimal places in, but you can adjust the decimal places. And it puts a $sign out here at the left side. And these numbers in the middle here, I don't want $signs on them. I just want, if the numbers are bigger than 1,000, I want a comma there. And again, a comma formatting gives you 2 decimal places, and I don't want those there either. So there we go. And you notice that when I apply the comma formatting, the numbers line up now. When I had just general formatting, that 1500 was all the way over to the edge, and the numbers didn't look quite right because they weren't aligned. So those are some basics for formatting numbers. Let's take a look at these numbers over here. This column is labeled percent of budget, and these are decimal fractions, but it kind of sounds like maybe they ought to be displayed as percent. So that's what the percent button here is for. It basically, it leaves the number the same, but it displays it as a percentage value rather than as a decimal fraction. Now let's select these columns here, and we're going to resize the column width. And one thing you can do here is if you select multiple columns and adjust the width of one, they all get adjusted to the same width. So if you want a bunch of columns to be the same width, that's a real handy way to do it. Okay, we've got also some cell styles up here, which are kind of handy. I've got a title up here. Actually, the ones I use under cell styles are mostly the ones in the titles and headings row right here. And title is good for something like the budget here. That's going to be an overall title. And then with these other things here, those headings, you can select different heading styles, and it does a live preview for you here. So you can pick the one you want. Let's go with heading 2 here. And you can also format these with a cell style. And I don't want underlines under them, so the only one here without an underline, except for the title here, is heading 4. So that's a quick way to format them. Notice it kept my vertical alignment and my horizontal alignment when I changed formatting. It just changed the font color and font size and font style. Another nice built-in cell style is the totals. If I go over here and click on total, it puts a skinny or one line above and 2 lines down below, which is a typical way to represent totals. Now you notice it also goes back to the default font for my spreadsheet. So if I want to make that Verdana, type in VE, select Verdana, and let's make it size 10, the same as everything else. And there, now it looks a little bit more like the other numbers that I've got. Now when you're done with your spreadsheet and it looks the way you want it to look, you'll probably want to save it or print it. Saving and printing are just like they are in all other Windows applications. Go to the File menu here, and if you want to save it, click on Save, and it will save it for you. Now this was already a download, so it just resaved it on top of what was already there. If you want to change the file name, click on Save As, and that'll let you go to the same folder or any other folder you want to, and provide a new name. And if you want to print, print is just like it is in Word and other Office applications. You've got a bunch of settings down here that can control what your document's going to look like when you print it. And actually what we might want to do here is go to Page Setup, and there's one thing I want to take a look at. Here's where you can change the orientation. This one is really nice. If you've got text that's just a little bit too big for one page, you can shrink it down here, or you can make it fit, specify how many pages wide and how many pages tall you want it to be. Under margins here, you can center it horizontally or vertically, and this apparently does not do a live preview, so I'll click on OK here, and it slides over. Now it's centered. Let's go back to Page Setup here, and go to margins. You can also center it vertically if you want to. You have to click on OK to see that, and that should move everything down. Let's go back to Page Setup again. I don't really like the way that one looks, so I'm going to turn the vertical off. This is where you can also change your margins. This is also where you can go to put in a header. And just click on custom header, and you get 3 sections, and we're going to be putting our name in the right hand side, so just type your name in. If you want to format it, select it first, and here is your font formatting dialog box, and you can format it any way you want to. And when I click on OK now, should get my name appearing up there. One more thing on page setup. Let's go back and look at the sheet tab here. You can set a print area so you don't print the entire spreadsheet. You don't have to print all of it every time if you don't want to. If you've got a long spreadsheet and you're printing rows and rows and rows, and you want the columns to appear at the top of every page so you don't have to constantly go back to page 1 and see what they were, this is where you can do that. Same thing with headings on the left. You can also turn on grid lines, and you can print row and column headings. I'll turn these 2 things on and click on OK. I don't really like the way this is going to look. It puts the letters at the top and the rows over here on the left, and it draws the grid lines in. And actually, I think that's kind of an unattractive printout, so we're going to go back and we're going to turn grid lines off. We're going to turn row and column headings off, and click on OK. And now we have something that's ready to print. So those are your basic formatting commands in Excel 2013.